Dear students, in this video I am going to explain you the very first chapter in ICSE English 2 syllabus Chief Seattle speech. Before we begin with the speech, I would like you to know a brief history behind the chapter. So, Chief Seattle was a leader of Squamish tribe in Washington Territory in 19th century. So, the Squamish were called Red Indians. So why were these people called Red Indians? Let us study in brief about that. See, when Christopher Columbus discovered this place he thought to be India, and he mistakenly called these people Indians and Red Indians because of the color of the people. Though the mistake was soon recognized, but for centuries these Native Americans were called Red Indians. This is how the term Red Indians came into being. Now, to make you understand the situation of Red Indians and the Europeans, the colonizers, let us take an example of India itself. What happened to India when they were under the rule of Britishers? Britishers, being very powerful, they tried to suppress the Indian people, right? So their rights and they were not given proper rights on the land. Same happened with the Native Americans also. So these white settlers, the Europeans, they were so powerful and they were so authoritative that they wanted to exercise control over the Red Indians. They were so guided by materialism that they wanted to buy Native Americans' land. The land that meant a home to them. So they were very attached, Native Americans were very attached to the land. And this Chief Seattle speech is in response to a proposal that is being sent by the governor then to buy the land of the Red Indians, and in return of that they will be allowed to live a comfortable life. See how ironical. They are buying the land that belonged to Red Indians, and they will allow them to live a comfortable life. They don't even have a right to live a comfortable life. So this is the basic idea behind Chief Seattle to deliver this speech. So before we start with the speech, you need to know the emotions and feelings of this leader behind delivering this speech. He's so compassionate towards the nature. He's so attached. The people, the Red Indians, are so attached to the land, whereas this white settlers, they just considered it a commercial entity and they had no feelings or no connection with the land. So let us start with the speech. Yonder sky that has wept tears of compassion upon my people for centuries untold, and which to us appears changeless and eternal, may change. So in the very beginning of the speech, has shown his connection to nature. So he says in the beginning of the speech, pointed out, yonder means that he's pointing out towards sky while he's delivering his speech. He says that even sky has wept tears of sympathy for his people for centuries. And he says that the situation that appears changeless, that nature will always be sympathetic with us. This situation appears changeless, but it may change. The situation that is at present today may not remain the same tomorrow. He says today is fair. Today is fair means the situation today is okay, it's normal. Tomorrow it may be overcast with clouds. So how is the weather like when it is cloudy? It isn't a good weather. So it shows that maybe in the upcoming like you can say in the near future you could have rain, thunderstorms. So similarly he's trying to you can say that he's trying to tell his situation, the situation of the Native Americans through this nature, that today the weather is fine, tomorrow it might be overcast with clouds. So today we might be living in a fine situation, but it may not be same tomorrow. He says, my words are like stars that never change. So he's trying to tell the whites that his words are not going to change. Whatever he says, he'll remain stuck with the words. Later he will ascertain his reliability by correlating his words to the stars that never change. He says, see, in the next very first line, he says that whatever Seattle says, the great chief that is at Washington can rely upon with much certainty as he can upon the return of sun and seasons. So he's saying that my words are like stars that never change. So he compares his words to the stars that never change by ascertaining reliability on his words. See, these people, they never believed in the writings. So unlike this white settlers, the white colonizers, who believed that everything that is written is the treaty. They were very materialistic. But he said that you can believe in my words. Whatever I say as a leader of Native Americans, of Red Indians, you can believe my words like you can believe the stars in the sky, and like you can believe in the return of and sun. Similarly, with that certainty, you can believe on my words. You can rely on my words. He also addresses the great chief in Washington, that is George Washington, that he can rely upon his words with as much certainty as he can upon the return of sun or seasons. So he is again insisting that he won't change his standpoint in response to the land treaty. So in the next line he says, the white chief says the big chief at Washington sends us the greetings of friendship and goodwill. He says that the big chief at Washington, that is George Washington, has sent a proposal of friendship and goodwill. This is kind of him, for we know he has little need of a friendship in return. So this white people, the Europeans, the colonizers, are so powerful that they don't need any, they don't need the friendship and goodwill of these Native Americans, because they are powerful in their own way. So he's saying it is a kind offer that he has sent us a proposal of friendship and goodwill. He calls it a kind offer. His people are many. So now he is letting us know that how this colonizers, the Europeans, are so many in number, whereas the Red Indians, they are few in number. They are left few in number. Furthermore, he compares his people. He says they are like grass that covers vast prairies. So his people here means the whites. So the whites are so many in number that they are compared to the grassland, and they are compared to the grass on the grassland. Like the grass is uncountable. You cannot count the grass strands that are growing on the grassland. So similarly, the white colonizers are so many in number, but he says my people are few. They resemble the scattering trees of a storm-swept plain. So as in an area, on a plain where because of storm there are very few trees left, others are uprooted or they are lying on the ground with their roots up. So there are very few scattered trees left on a storm-swept land. Similarly, his people are. They are very few in number. And again, the situation of the uprooted trees. So those who are left also, they are uprooted. They are not as strong as they were because the number has been reduced. So he's comparing his people to the scattering trees of a storm-swept plain, whereas the people, the whites, they are like the grass that covers the vast prairies, that is the grassland. Then he says, and I presume good white chief sends us a word that he wishes to buy our land but is willing to allow us live comfortably. So now in this part he's mentioning the actual land treaty. He says that the governor has sent a proposal in which he wishes to buy our land, and in return of that he will allow us to live a comfortable life. This indeed appears just and generous, for the red man no longer has the right that he need respect, and offer may be wise also, as we are no longer in need of an extensive country. So in this part, Chief Seattle points out that it is a very generous and kind offer sent by the whites, because the red Indians, they no longer have the rights of the land. So they are left they are very few in number, and the whites are very powerful that they don't need to send this proposal at all. They can otherwise also acquire the land, being so powerful. So it is generous and kind of the colonizers to have sent this proposal to the red Indians, because they no longer have respect. They are no longer having the land rights. So it is wise, he says, to accept the offer. He is addressing his own red people, red Indians, the Native Americans. He is addressing that it is wise to accept the offer because they are no longer in need of a vast land. They don't need an extensive country, an expanded country. So there was a time when a people covered the land as the waves of wind-ruffled sea cover its shell-paved floor. So he's recalling the time when his people covered the land like the waves of a wind-ruffled sea covered its shell-paved floor. Ruffled here means disturbed. So when there is a disturbing wind in the sea that is covering the shell-paved floor, so the bottom of the sea that is covered with the shells of tortoise, turtles, or other sea creatures. So when the wind is disturbing the sea that is covering the shell-paved floor, there are so many waves in the sea. So Chief Seattle is comparing number of people that cover like the waves that covered a wind-ruffled sea, that covered like the waves of a wind-ruffled sea that covered the shell-paved floor of the sea. So you need to understand the comparison. He is comparing his people that were so many in number that they covered the land like the waves of a wind-ruffled sea covered the shell-paved floor of the sea. So when there is disturbing wind in the sea, there are so many waves in the sea. So these so many waves in a wind-ruffled sea are compared to so many people in America, so many native peoples in America that covered the land like the waves of wind-ruffled sea covered the shell-paved floor. Then he says, but that time long since passed away with the greatness of tribe, and that are now but a mournful memory. So he's saying it is just a mournful memory now. So those times when people were so many in number is no more now. So now his people have reduced in number. They are very less in number. I will not dwell on nor mourn over the untimely decay. So he is saying that I am not going to dwell on. He's saying that he is not going to live on or be sad on the untimely decay of the people. So the people before time. So the number has decreased to such an extent that he is calling, Chief Seattle is calling it untimely decay. So he's saying, I'm not going to mourn over, be sad over this untimely decay of my people, nor reapproach my pale-faced brothers with hastening it, as we too may have been somewhat to blame. He says, I will not blame the pale-faced brothers. The pale-faced brothers here are the white Europeans, the colonizers who have sent the proposal. So he's saying that I will not blame them for the present condition. He says we too are also somewhat to blame for what we are suffering from today or what we are going through today. Even we people, the Red Indians, are also somewhere responsible for their own situation. So let's see how. He's saying youth is impulsive. He's addressing the youth of Red Indians. When our young people grow angry at some real or imaginary wrong and disfigure their faces with black paint, it denotes that their hearts are black. This youth of Red Indian they were very violent, they were very impulsive, and what did they do? They used to color their faces in black paint in order to revolt against this white people. So they used to be very violent, and he says by coloring their faces and by disfiguring their faces with black paint, it denoted that even their hearts are black, and that they are often cruel and relentless, and our old men and women are unable to restrain them. So he says that they are very cruel and they are very relentless, and the old people, the old Red Indians, are unable to stop this youth, the impulsive youth, from revolting against the white Europeans. So they are very cruel, and they are very relentless, they are very harsh, and the old men and women of the Red tribe, they are unable to restrain them, to stop them or control them. Thus it has been, so it has continued. So he's saying that it is not only the whites who are to blame for what is happening to us, even we are also somewhat to blame, because the youth of Red Indians is very impulsive and very harsh, and they grow violent, they color their faces black, that denotes their black heart, and even the old men and women are unable to stop them, and this has been continued. Thus it was when the white man began to push our forefathers ever westwards. So see, this is the reason that the whites, they started pushing our people to other countries westward. So they were forced to leave their own native land, and they were forced to move westward, leaving their own place. But let us hope that the hostilities between us may never return. So he is again on a positive note. He is saying that we don't want these hostilities or these enmity between the two races to return again. So he's saying that I don't want the hostilities between the two races return again. We would have everything to lose and nothing to gain. If the hostilities between Red Indians and the white colonizers return, then they will have nothing to lose. They will have everything to lose and nothing to gain, because they will be left with nothing. In case they again start with whatever they had been doing earlier, the enmity between both the communities, between both the races, will make them lose everything, and they will have nothing to gain. Revenge by a young man is considered gain even at the cost of their own lives. But the old men who stay at homes in the times of war, and mothers who have sons to lose, know better. So this situation is same with like any other country that is fighting for freedom from the colonizers. So let us compare this situation with India. What happened during the freedom struggle? Youth, the youngster, they revolted against the Britishers. So at times when the old men and women, the mothers, used to stop them, they were so filled up with that patriotic feeling towards the nation that they were unstoppable. Same thing happened with Red Indian here. The young man considered sacrificing their life for their country as a gain. And but he says, Chief Seattle says, but the old men and the mothers who stay back at the time of war, they know that what they have to lose. So they have sons to lose in the war. So he's trying to tell the his people, his Native Americans, the Red Indians, that in such, if the hostilities between both the races return back, then they will have nothing to gain but everything to lose, like they have lost earlier. So the young people who considered it to be a gain, even at the cost of their own lives, they were considering it to be gain, but the young men and the women who stayed, the mothers who stayed back at the times of war, know better that they had sons to lose. In the next paragraph, he addresses good father in Washington, that is George Washington. He says, our good father in Washington, for I presume he is now our father as well as yours. So our father here means the father of Red Indian, and yours means here white settlers, white colonizers, the Europeans. He says that our father, he is not only, he is our father also now. Why? He gives the reason. Since King George has moved his boundaries further north, our great and good father, I say, sends us a word that if we do as he desires, he will protect us. So he's saying that George Washington has sent a proposal that if we do whatever he desires, if we agree to the land treaty, then he's going to protect our women, children, and natives attack of other enemies. So this race, the Red Indians, being a very weak race, and they were left very few in numbers, so the Europeans were not the only ones who wanted to colonize and acquire their land. They had other enemies too. So George Washington, in the proposal in the land treaty, has said that if they agree to the terms and conditions of the land treaty, if they agree to sell their land to the whites, then in return of that, they are also going to protect the women and children. He says that his brave warriors will be a bristling wall of strength, and his wonderful ships of war will fill our harbors, so that our ancient enemies far to the northwards. So he's saying the Haidas and Shimantians. So he's saying that these ancient enemies from north will cease to frighten the natives, as the white man's ships of war will fill the harbor, and his army will make a strong wall of strength to protect the Native Americans. So these, through the proposal, George Washington has not only told them that in return of the land they will allow them to live a comfortable life, but he has also told them that they will protect, in case they agree to the proposal, then they will protect the Native Americans from their ancient enemies, so the Siachians and the Haidas, who were the enemies, who were their ancient enemies from north, and they were people from other tribes who were frightening the Native Americans. He said that the whites will, with their warships and with their soldiers, the warriors, they will build a strong wall of strength, and they will protect the Native Americans from their ancient enemies. And the ancient enemies, the Haidas and the Siachians, they will cease, they will stop to frighten our women, children and old men, and they will stop to frighten the women, children and old men. This in reality will be our father as we his children. He says if this happens, if they protect us from the ancient enemies, then in reality he will be our father. Who's he here? George Washington. And we will be his children. But can that ever be? So now he's questioning himself, that can this ever happen? Your God is not our God. So he is saying that your God, the God of Europeans, the whites, is not the God of Red Indians. Your God and hates mine. So he's saying that your God loves the people of whites and they hate the Red Indians. He folds his strong protecting arms lovingly about the pale face and leads them by hand as a father leads an infant son. So pale face here means the whites only. So he's saying he here is the God. So he's saying God of white, he protects face children in his protecting arms, like a father leads a little young baby child, baby son of his. Similarly, the God is protecting, putting his arms lovingly around his pale-faced children and is leading them. But he has forsaken his red children, if they really are his. But he's saying that the God, he, H is capital. So he's saying that God has forsaken, he has left his red children if they really are his children. So the God is only protecting and loving the pale face, the whites, and not the red children, not the Native Americans. Our God, the Great Spirit, seems to also have forsaken us. So these Red Indians, they believed in the Great Spirit. That was the God. The whites, they believed in Christianity, right? So the God of white, the Christ, he's saying that the whites' God protected only the white people and not the Red Indians. So he's saying that even our God, the Great Spirit, has also left us, has also forsaken us. Your God makes your people wax stronger every day. So the God of the whites, your God here means God of whites, are making his people stronger day by day. The God of whites is making his people wax stronger every day. Soon they will fill the land. So soon this land, America, will be filled by the whites only, because God is with them and he is making his people wax stronger day by day. So soon the day is not far when the entire land will be filled by the whites, because the God is the God is blessing these people. He's protecting his people lovingly, like a father leads his infant son. Similarly, God of whites is helping and protecting his people and is making his people wax stronger, that one day they will fill the entire land with the whites, the entire land of America with only whites. Our people are ebbing away like a rapidly receding tide that will never return. So he's saying our people. So the Red Indians are ebbing away, are moving away like a rapidly receding tide. So the receding tide is the tide in the ocean that moves back. And he's saying, he's comparing his people to the receding tide that is not going to come back again. So he's saying that our people are like a receding tide, the tide in the ocean that is moving back. So his people are also ebbing away, are moving back to return. They are already very less in number and they are never going to return. But the whites, they are getting back stronger day by day because their God is protecting them. And whereas the God of Red Indians have forsaken them, and even the white God of white is not protecting, is being very partial to white, and he is protecting his white people only and not the Red Indians. So he's saying our people are like a tide, a receding tide that will never return. The white man's God cannot love our people, or he would protect them. So he's saying the white man's God. He is talking about the God of white man. They believed in Christianity. He's saying the God of white man cannot love our people, or he would protect them. So he's saying that he's very sure that the God of white is never going to protect the Red Indians. They seem to be orphans who can look nowhere for help. So he is calling the Native Americans orphans because there's nobody who is going to help these Native Americans. How then can we be brothers? He says when we are so different from each other, when the God of your God is not going to help us, is not going to protect us, is not going to make us stronger like it is making you, then how can we call ourselves brothers? How can your God become our God and renew our prosperity and awaken in us dreams of returning greatness? He's saying when your God is being so partial towards you, is protecting you like a father protecting his infant son, is making you wax stronger day by day, has forsaken us, then how can we expect that your God is going to become our God and going to renew our prosperous days again and is going to awaken in us the dreams of the greatness? So they had once filled the lands like the prairies in the grasslands, so that like the grass in the prairies. So they were so many in number. So they were like the waves in the wind-ruffled sea that covered the shell-paved floor. So they were so many in number. So they had lived that greatness. They were so great. They had enjoyed that prosperity and great days. So he's saying now we cannot expect your God to return that back because it has forsaken us. It's no more with us. It's only with its pale-faced children, the white Europeans. If we have a common heavenly father, he must be partial. He's saying if we have a common father, then the God is very partial. For he came to his pale-faced children. He says because he is protecting only his pale-faced children, only the whites. We never saw him. So he's saying the God of this whites is protecting only his white children, and he says, we have never seen this God because he has never come to protect us. He gave you laws. So the white God of white has given the laws to the whites and has not helped these red Indians in any way. So we will continue the next part in another video, in part 2 of the video. Till now, I hope everything is clear to you and you have understood whatever I have explained to you in this video. To just give you an overview of what we have done in this video, in the very beginning paragraph of the speech, Chief Seattle is referring to the nature. He's saying that nature has protected his people and sympathized with them for centuries, but the situation is going to change now. He addresses the great chief in Washington and says that he wishes to buy their land, and in return of that he will allow them to live a comfortable life. And he says that it is a very kind and generous offer because his people are very powerful as compared to the natives, and they don't need any proposal like that. So this is a very kind and generous offer sent by George Washington. He also compares that how the number of people of the native has been reduced, how his people were so many in number like the grass that covers the vast prairies, and how they were so many in number like the waves of the wind-ruffled sea that covered the shell-paved floor. But now they are very few in number. Then he also says that how his people responsible for whatever happened to them. He refers to the impulsive youth that is also somewhere to blame for whatever happened to the Native Americans and how they were forced to leave their own country and move westward because of the impulsive behavior of the youth. But then again, he coming back to the proposal of George Washington. He says that George Washington will protect us from the ancient enemies from north if we do what he has proposed. If we agree to his proposal, he will protect the women, children and old men from the enemies, from our ancient enemies. And then he is questioning somewhere at the end of page number 43, he is questioning that can they be brothers, because the god of whites is only protecting his white pale-faced children and not the red Indians. Even the god of red Indian has forsaken the red Indians, and they are, so he's asking a question that how can they be brothers. So when the god is not with them and it is being very partial, and he has come only for his pale-faced children and not for the red Indians. So we have done till here. We'll continue this speech in the next video. Please do let me know in case anything is not clear. I'll clarify that in the next video. Thank you so much for watching the video. Thank you.